watching Morning at NTV.
Good morning. Welcome back to Morning at NTV. Thank you so much for choosing us. My name is Malaki Vilodera. Now you can be part of this conversation. Very exciting. Today we will be talking about hard stuff, tax justice. Yes, so the hashtag is Morning at NTV. That's on Twitter. You can also stream us live and drop in your comments. NTV Uganda, that's on Facebook and YouTube pages. Tax justice. The conversation about taxation has been a big one, not just here in the country, but globally. How do we address this? And so in studios to talk about that and to shed light and maybe solutions to achieve that particular quote-unquote ideal situation is Mr. Muhereza Alan Murangira, who is the team leader, Youth for Tax Justice Network. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Now, next to him is Mr. Ian Mutibwa. He's the head of Tax Signum Advocates. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and good morning, dear viewers.
Good morning. Mr. Allen, let me start with you. Last week you had an event.
Yes.
How did that go about? How did it fare on?
Okay, last week we had an event.
Yeah.
We were celebrating the African Youth Day, which is celebrated every year. On the 1st of November to celebrate youth participation and contribution to development of our society. So last week we celebrated the African Youth Day under the theme exploring spaces for youth engagement on tax justice. And we wanted to celebrate this because we are acknowledging that tax is becoming really an issue that young people should really look at. Because it affects every bit of our lives, and we believe that at Youth for Tax Justice Network that most of the challenges that young people are facing right now in Uganda and across the continent, we can solve them if we have progressive and fair tax systems. So last week we met at Makerere University where we celebrated the African Youth Day, and with the simple message that young people should really get interested in discussing tax issues and seeing what they can do about them.
You actually had a public dialogue, and
Yes.
so with regards to solutions and issues that are being raised with regards to tax justice, what are some of these issues and solutions that were proposed during that particular dialogue?
Of course, one of the issues that we propose is that we have to have young people engage in some of these processes from the point of policy formulation. If it is at the level of passing tax laws, young people should put in their input, be it at Parliament, be it with the Tax Policy Department at Ministry of Finance. But at that point of policy formulation, young people should be able to have a voice to contribute. And if we had done that, probably wouldn't even have had the backlash of the mobile money tax, the backlash of the OTT tax and all that, if they had been engaged in these processes. Then also young people must also engage in how tax revenue is allocated to priority areas that benefit their well-being, and that can be done during budgetary processes, when the budget is passed out, when it is read, or when it is still at the local government level.
Right.
So that is one of them. They could also engage in politics. Tax is a political issue. In developed economies, your tax policy will either win you the election or will lose you the election. So they should participate either as voters or as monitors or as even participants, contestants.
All right.
Those are some of the solutions we are trying to give so that we have a say in the tax policy that we have.
Okay, with regards to the youth getting a table or a sitting with regards to tax policies being formulated and them being part of it, of course, is a conversation that we'll have later on before we come to a close, because you guys have been there for 3 years. So what's the reception, with the young people being brought to the table? Mr. Ian Mutibwa, let's talk about tax justice and what exactly is it, just for the sake of the viewer. Just break it down for us in a very simplistic and understandable way.
How do I break down something so complex? But I'll give it a try. Tax justice, basically, as you hear, justice means fairness. How do we make a tax system that is fair? In other words, how does everyone pay the right amount of tax at the right time? That's what tax justice means. Now, this is something that cuts across so many things, But most importantly is what people need to understand are two different concepts that push the tax justice agenda. And that is tax avoidance and tax evasion.
Right.
Now, those two are really important aspects that everyone needs to consider. What is tax avoidance? What's tax evasion? Tax avoidance simply means I have a way of not paying the tax legally. Tax evasion, on the other hand, is I do not pay it, and it's illegal for me not to pay it. So the two things bring into what we call tax justice, because you find that the corporations or biggest corporations in the world always want to reduce their tax base and shift their profits to areas where they pay little or no tax, because they're in it for the profit, they're in it for the business. And what tax justice means is that now how do we make sure that even those big multinational corporations are paying a fair share of tax? We've had various examples, such as Starbucks in the UK, which had 400 million pounds in sales, but only paid tax of 1.3 million because they had a good tax planning technique. Apple has had a backlash in Ireland as well. We've had Google also having different backlashes, and we've had people coming up to talk about how just the tax system should be, why these people should actually be paying their fair share of the tax because they're making revenues from different areas. And so that's basically, in a nutshell, what tax justice is about.
Okay, all right. And of course, the people who take advantage of that and take advantage of tax havens are not only the multinationals, but also the bigwigs, the rich in society.
Yes.
And the conversation has been, if they then make profits and take these monies to these tax havens, quote unquote, where there's financial secrecy, then they rob off African countries, you know, developing countries of their legit money to grow their economy. So with regards to just addressing that, do we address the individuals or do we address the systemic issue and loopholes that are there, not just in Africa, but globally?
You need to address both the individual and the systems, because, and I think first the systems, because tax is low. And whenever tax is one of the most dynamic things that I know of. They keep evolving. Tax keeps evolving every other day. Now, wherever it evolves, the tax planners think of ways of how to go about this loophole. You saw it in Uganda when OTT was introduced.
Right.
Someone thought about VPN. That is tax avoidance, I would think. When such things come into play, the laws need to be tightened. And there are so many ways which I've discussed with my colleague on how best we can harness these systems to make sure that everyone is brought to book. Because the high net worth individuals also find ways of getting these tax rebates to make sure they pay little tax.
Right.
One of the things I've discovered is that donations or philanthropy is a way of reducing your tax. so you'll find that the high net worth individuals are
philanthropy is a matter of someone having a state of a good heart.
It's
to
both.
help.
It's both having a good heart and also a tax, because you get a tax rebate for being a good guy. Yes. So I think the system need to be looked at. But one thing you should know is that every time we think of a way of capturing these profits back into a certain jurisdiction, there's someone somewhere planning on how best to not to bring them in that jurisdiction.
Right.
So there's always going to be tax plan. There's always going to be a way to look for ways to evade this tax.
Right. Mr. Allen, just bring us in on this one. With regards to the conversation that you actually had on Thursday with the public dialogue that you had, what are some of the solutions? And I'll still get on that one because I need you to get us to the actual thing that most of them are proposing. Some of the solutions to just addressing this. Remember, it's the multinationals and the rich that actually take advantage of this. And this leakage happens thanks to them. So what are the young people saying?
Okay, I think I'll go back to what I said. First, the politics or the governance issue. Multinationals in any country, a study was done by Tax Justice Network Africa that realized that taxation as an issue is about number 8, 9 of the things companies consider when they are investing in another country. So it means that they consider other things besides the tax. But when you come to our governance, people use taxation as a way of attracting foreign direct investment. Yet, when these people are coming, they are brought by other things. They have the market, there is the infrastructure.
But do we blame them? And yet, you see,
exactly,
like for example,
that's what I'm coming to.
For example, in Uganda, let me
Yes.
just bring this point in before you actually finish your point. Here in Uganda, one of the methods that the government has used to just entice foreign direct investment and also investors to come in is just giving them tax holidays.
Yes.
And the conversation has been, do they really need this?
Yes, that is what I was coming to. That first and foremost, they don't need them. I'll give an example that before 2007, Somalia didn't have a functioning state, so it meant that your tax liability would be zero, but
right.
You didn't see these companies go to Somalia. So tax is not really something that you would give to a multinational, tax holidays and all that. Of course, now the question would be, how do we then influence our leaders not to make policies that are detrimental to ourselves? And that's what I was saying, that let us engage them from the point of where you go to make laws. I'll give an example. My colleague here talked about the overseas jurisdictions and the outflows of finances. That is basically and mainly facilitated by double taxation treaties, which we sign with some of these countries. So you find out that a company will do what we call treaty shopping. They will say, I want to invest in Uganda, but Uganda's corporate tax is, the rate is 30%. So it looks for a country which has a double taxation agreement with Uganda, and in that country, probably the rate is 15, or as Mauritius, which is usually 3 or below. So it will go, register in Mauritius, come and take advantage of the double taxation agreement that Uganda has with Mauritius. So the engagement then therefore comes to our, for example, tax policymakers. How do they then make double taxation treaties that are not detrimental to our revenue mobilization? And of course, how they then do that is you engage. And as young people, we want to start having these conversations. If it is at the policy level, we talk to Minister of Finance and we tell them, look here, if you're to make a double taxation agreement, let it be a win-win. Let it not, because we had that during the heritage case, the oil case, we realized from the Panama paper links that it tried to change its residency to Mauritius for the sole purpose of benefiting from the Mauritius-Uganda double taxation treaty. So at the first point, what we are trying to say is that let us influence where it matters. Okay. And this is when it comes to making of the tax laws, be it international like double taxation treaties or local ones like our tax laws, the income tax, the VAT and all that. Then let us also follow up. When we say, for example, companies have to make certain declarations, are they really doing it? When we ask, for example, our revenue authorities that do they have this data? For example, if we asked URA today, does it know how many people are paying OTT? Because ideally when I pay, I'm supposed to get a receipt, I'm supposed to get all these things, but I don't. I would want to deduct, as he said, my OTT from my income, but I don't have a receipt. So how then will URA really verify that this is the amount that we are getting from? So I would think that the young people should engage where it matters, and this is where the decisions are made, and eventually, of course, how the money is used. Maybe to talk about tax evasion and avoidance again. Of course, the conversation now is shifting to, well, is it morally right to, that's why we bring in the fair bit of it, that, well, you can pay tax, but you should pay what you ought to pay anyway. Yeah,
what you ought to pay.
Yes. And I think that's where the whole that's where the whole evasion avoidance thing comes. What determines what I should be paying? Yes. It is the law. Yes. Now, if the law says I can do this and this without paying, then it becomes legal. And right. That's what we call, in tax we call it a hybrid mismatch. You find that jurisdictions have different ways of treating. Now, I need to explain this. It's a very technical aspect. So I want to explain it in as much simple language as I can. You find multinational corporations take out their profits in several ways: interest expense, dividends, royalties, management charge.
Right.
Now, because you want to attract foreign direct investment, you will probably say where you invest $1 million. I'll give you an example of Uganda. Uganda says where you invest $200 million, you have a tax exemption from stamp duty, from VAT, from income tax. So an inflow of $200 million in the country would exempt you from all taxes. That means that when I'm taking out the interest expense, if it's a debt to the company, I should be exempt from that tax. Now, if I'm exempt from that tax, I'll take it out as an interest. Now, if I take my money, my profit out as an interest, I'll take it, say, to Mauritius. Mauritius says, oh, let's give an example of Hong Kong. Let's give a live example. Hong Kong. Hong Kong only taxes you on the revenues earned in Hong Kong. That means if I earn revenues outside of Hong Kong, I can bring them in and they're not taxed.
Yeah.
So I'll take out my interest from Uganda tax-free, take it to Hong Kong, it's also tax-free. I've actually taken advantage of a hybrid mismatch. I have not evaded tax. I've basically paid the fair share of tax. So when you talk about tax justice, I think, I'm made to believe that the morality of the tax comes in. Whereas what I'm doing is legal, is it morally right?
Right.
When your conscience comes and hits and says, I'm actually making too much money from here, because what happens is people move money from high tax jurisdictions to low tax jurisdictions. So you find Uganda's 30%, Cayman Islands as 0. So you say, let me move from Uganda, take Cayman Islands, where I'm going to be taxed at 0 or 1%. That's what tax avoidance and the tax planning comes about.
Right.
So tax morality will tie into, I am doing this is legal, but is it morally right?
Yeah. Then it brings me to the question, when the government actually came up with these tax laws and brought the concept of just giving these investors tax holidays, then did we go wrong on that one? And if at all we did go wrong, because clearly it seems we went wrong somehow, how would we have approached that issue and still attract investors at the same time? As
Alan was saying, what attracts a multinational into a jurisdiction is not tax. It's not purely tax. The advisory you give would be on employment laws, on immigration, on corporate laws, on political climate, on investment climate. They look at the totality. Tax is a by the way, because in any case they can actually plan for it. So what attracts companies into or investors or FDI into a certain jurisdiction is the surrounding circumstances. What's the politics? What is the economics? What is the inflation rates? So you look at all that and say, I can invest $1 million in Uganda.
Right.
Or I can't. So tax is a most, and people have argued that, can we take out the tax exemptions from our laws, because that is it does not influence investment too much. So can we take it out? However, realize that even if you take out the tax exemptions and the investors come, they'll still plan.
They'll still plan around it.
They'll still plan around it.
Because someone actually said that when it comes to tax avoidance and the rich and of course the multinationals, they do it very strategically. Actually, they employ the most elite and the smartest financial experts to just advise them on how to go about avoiding taxation. So when it comes to that, of course, we can't fight this thing provided there's still tax havens.
Yes.
So what conversations should we be having globally moving forward? Because that's the only solution, seems like, right?
We have had some discussions. There's what they call BEPS. Yeah. That's base erosion and profit shifting. So base erosion and profit shifting means that you erode a base and shift your profit elsewhere. And they have had various international discussions on how to prevent that. There have been rules on hybrid mismatches to prevent that base erosion. However, one of the most interesting one that has come up in the more developed countries is what we call tax shaming, naming and shaming. So they come and say, Starbucks, you're not giving us our fair share of tax. We're going to boycott your coffee. Yeah. Okay. Apple, you're not doing ABCD. We're not going to boycott your products. Now, the question that comes up with naming and shaming is that, yes, you've named and shamed, and some companies have actually come out and said, although I don't think I did wrong, I'll actually pay that tax. So you come out and pay them the money. But the question of naming and shaming is, how far will it go on putting down sales, putting down profits, especially in jurisdictions like Uganda? I mean, you can name and shame and nothing happened.
Yeah, nothing. People
But-
move on.
But it also works.
Yeah.
There's been, I think, some naming and shaming in Uganda as well. And you realize that people's reactions would be different. People would probably start paying tax. But I want to take this to a more domestic, we're arguing tax evasion on a more multinational,
Right.
high net worth.
Yeah.
What about the domestic?
Yeah.
How does tax justice come into the domestic market? It comes in such a way that you find that the biggest revenues that government makes are from people who are employed. That the person who's employed is paying pay-as-you-earn, is paying local service tax and all the other taxes that come along with it. However, someone in a remote area is not paying any tax. So where's the justice? Where's the fairness in that? So as a government or as a youth are engaging in the government into having this tax fairness, they should also look out the fact that government needs to expand and tap into the untapped markets, and then they can bring the money back.
One would actually argue that, of course, in the rural areas, they somewhat pay taxes via the goods and products they buy.
Yes.
So, for example, you go to the shop, the chibanda next to you in the rural home, and you have to buy maybe a kg of fat or a liter of oil, then, of course, in there, there's VAT.
Yeah.
So somehow you're paying your tax.
Yes.
But how then do we take this conversation forward? And I'll bring you in as the youth. And my first question would be, it's been 3 years now. How has the reception been? You know, is government willing to now bring you on board? And then with that in mind, how then do we address this issue moving forward, the issue of tax laws in the country? Like you're saying, let's bring the conversation home and deal with it. Of course, them that are earning a coin or two are being taxed directly. But can the government survive entirely on domestic revenue collection alone? Can we just be deliberate about, you know, taking away this issue of tax holidays and making sure that the multinationals, the investors that come on board, pay a fair share of whatever they're getting into?
Probably to start with your last point.
Yes.
I don't think it's the question on tax incentives is it's a generic one. I think we should talk about harmful tax exemptions, and these are exemptions that are given to people that don't need them. As young people, for example, like I said, we believe that the tax policy can solve our issues. For example, if you look at Uganda's rate of small-scale and medium enterprises, young people are trying to innovate here and there, do business, and when you talk to them, the ones that we've engaged with, they will tell you the first thing they fear. If you tell them go for Milais, register, start, you could get credit from a bank. If you registered company, you could do. Then they will tell you the tax man. So at that level, government could look at if instead of giving 20 companies like in the financial of 2016-2017, government gave 20 companies over 77 billion shillings worth of tax exemptions. But these are profit-making companies.
Right.
Yet they are young companies run by young people, employing young people that are choking on taxes because they can't afford to do tax planning. They cannot.
They can afford them, not expensive.
They do not know which taxes
Yeah,
they're supposed
yeah.
to pay. They do not know. So at the point of tax incentives, I think the point young people like myself are trying to make is that let's deal away with the harmful ones. Because we acknowledge that there are certain sectors whereby if you enabled them, we wouldn't have the issue of unemployment, for example, among young people.
Right.
So for the tax incentives, they're saying, yes, multinationals should. We don't really think that they need these tax incentives. And even the way they are given, by the way, it's a broader policy conversation that how do they get them? How do you evaluate them? Because you give an incentive for a purpose. You say, we've given you this incentive so that you invest. We've given you this incentive so that you... So how do you evaluate that actually? This company has created jobs. This
Okay.
company has... So on the bit of tax incentives, we are saying, well, let us have those that we really need. And for us, we are saying those that help grow the local economy to the young people. But then for the multinationals, they should really pay. Then when it goes back to our tax laws, on moving forward, like he was saying, tax avoidance is illegal. These things, we know them. Then let us make them illegal if we can, in some circumstances.
Especially
if we
aggressive avoidance.
It's
We need to classify that.
I need to see that.
Yeah.
But I want to give a solution.
Okay. As we come to a close, though, one second.
We realize that the majority of the population in Uganda, demographics, mainly youth.
Yes.
We need to have what we call tax accountability. Tax accountability means if I'm paying a tax, do I get a service in return?
Exactly.
Because it's a social contract. We've had a social contract with government, and the consideration that we have is tax. I'm paying money. Do I see where that money is going?
Right.
Without tax accountability, we shall still be in the cycle of I don't care, exemptions are given, and you know, nothing happens.
All right.
Yeah.
So what we've agreed on, it's just 3 points. Number one, if we're to fight this, then the country needs to relook the tax laws. Let's see who we are giving incentives to. Let's see who we are giving holidays to, because pretty much a majority don't need that, right? The other thing we need to look into, it's the global conversation on how to, you know, just tame the tax havens, because that's where the leakage comes in, because provided they're there, this issue will never be sorted out. The other thing is tax accountability, very key. You're taxing your people, let them see where this money is going, you know, going to. Thank you so much for coming in studios. Muhereza Alan Murangira, team leader, Youth for Tax Justice Network. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ian Mutibwa, head of tax, Signum Advocates. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much. We need to make more time and
Yes,
just have this conversation. It's quite complex, so breaking it down is very important for the people to understand how it actually affects them. Okay, thank you so much for coming in studios. That has been it for Kickstarter segment. Morning at NTV still continues. Up next is Andrew Chamagero with Reality on the Ground. Keep it here.